Welcome back. We're looking forward to continue this Perek Hey, the fifth epistle of the Alter Rebbe. This is the fourth segment of the entire Tanya, Igeres HaKodesh. As we spoke many times, Tanya is comprised of 5 segments. The fourth would be Igeres HaKodesh, different and distinct as the previous segments. This is letters written, again, to certain communities, in certain times, based on certain circumstances. And the calling of the Alter Rebbe, the appeal of the Alter Rebbe, of course, is distinct in every single letter, even though we did mention many times there is a common thread between most of the Igeres HaKodesh, including this one, which is again the idea of unique appreciation of the Alter Rebbe in this very unique mitzvah of tzedakah. Again, we repeat this, of course, for the newcomers. This is a unique segment, again, distinct than the previous segments. We merited, Baruch Hashem, to conclude all the previous 3, starting from Okot Yamarim, Igeres HaTshuva, Igeres Shaarich V'Amunah, that is, Igeres HaTshuva. I mention this also because many times there are cross-references between one segment and the other, and therefore, when the Alter Rebbe even says, like I mentioned to you, even actually in this chapter, you have Okot Yamarim Chelik Beis, you refer to Shaarich V'Amunah. So, the fact that we learned it, it's up on the site. It's extremely easy to access the precise perek, pretty much where this is mentioned in that perek, in that chapter. And it is, of course, a schus to be able to navigate the Tanya up till this point of Igeres, fifth epistle of Igeres HaKodesh. But namely to point out that it's all up on the screen, and including this past class, which is obviously Igeres. This letter is quite a lengthier letter, even though if you follow, you see the perfect sequence of one idea to the other, and what the Alter Rebbe is eventually going to get to. Like any other presentation of the Alter Rebbe, it was called the Lisheni. The Alter Rebbe's writing was called Lisheni Hazav, the golden tongue, the golden language, the golden expression. You see throughout all the works of the Alter Rebbe that enormous in organization of writing. It's Shulchan Aruch, Halacha, Chassidus, Primis HaTeira, Likutei Teira, all his workings, many tens of Sfarim in Chassidus. We spoke about this in the past. We say the Alter Rebbe many times. Likutei Teira is more familiar to us, but there's many Sfarim, tens of Sfarim, Mamori, called Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe, Mamori Admarazakin. But in all these writings, there's the common thread. This is a very unique writer, very unique, organized. He was extremely organized in all his presentations. Writer, meaning to say his ability to convey his teachings was very unique. The style was very unique. And so too in this very chapter, in Tanya, of course, in the Igeres HaKodesh, you see how the Alter Rebbe builds up such a beautiful edifice, and of course, eventually, we will see the Alter Rebbe's punchline, and again, we'll appreciate how it enters into the Torah. There's so much Torah, so much conveyed in this very chapter. And again, the end, Alter Rebbe would establish the significance, the essentiality of the mitzvah tzedakah based on the Zayar. It says, Man dabit shema kadisha, man diyoiv tzedakah l'miskin. It establishes, wrecks Hashem's name every day. Who is that one? The one who gives tzedakah to the poor. Which is a cryptic statement, but the Alter Rebbe explains it in his inimitable manner and fashion of explanation. This very saying of Reb Shimon, this very saying of Reb Shimon, the Tana Reb Shimon, and in the end, when you conclude this chapter, you walk, that now it shines, now it makes sense. He's erecting Hashem's name. Who's the one who erects Hashem's name? The one who gives tzedakah to the poor. But we're holding on page Kuf Ches, 5 lines from the bottom. However, this lowly world. Now, Ach, however, comes immediately what he said before. You gotta. It's if you're following, you pretty much remember. But if not, it's a click away. It's the last class prior to this class. We don't want to take much time. For that matter, we don't want to take any time, but just to get into it a bit, much time we won't. Of the previous class in the present, we should utilize the time in the present class for the present information, because it's really, really a click away. So it's not fair. We have to take some real time. However, just to get into it, Dr. Rebbe explains the two ideas in this chapter, how the two dimensions of speech. One, there's the actual end game, external, if you will, expression of speech, which comes through the hebel, the breath, which strikes the kol, which is the voice, and then the five instruments, which is the tongue, the lips, the teeth, the gums, and the throat. That's where the letters are formulated. But as we said, there's something much deeper than that, much more pnimius than that, which allows the person to speak. As we see someone, God forbid, mute, he has all the instruments. He has them in the same setup, with the same perfection as a healthy human being, which means someone who is healthy doesn't have this Rahman al-Islam compromise, the Rahman al-Islam issue physically, but yet he can't talk. And the question is why? You have all the instruments. Similar to the one who's not a mute, that he can healthily talk in an orderly manner. And the answer is, speech doesn't begin from the area of the instruments, from the breath which eventually extends itself and strikes the 4 or 5 instruments and eventually formulates a word. That's not where it begins. That's the end game. That's the chitzonius. And it begins from the fact that the human being, the way Hashem created him, he has a nefesh, and that nefesh has the gift of speech. Of course, only man has the gift of speech. Any other creation, including creation which maneuver and eat and drink and so on, they can't talk, which is, of course, the animal world. They do a lot of stuff which are similar. The Gemara says a few things which in the human being is similar to the animal. The famous Gemara, Shleisha Dvarim, they equate there within the human being as an animal. And it works vice versa as well, of course. These are the commonality, because it's a live human being, a live created being, and therefore they function, they eat, they sleep, and whatever contributes to their comfort and pleasure and delight, they do, and they stay away from this which damages them. Sounds familiar? Yeah, there's a lot of the commonality between the animal and the human being, but yet, man became a nefesh chaya. Rashi says, the nefesh, or the Targum one calls it the nefesh memalala. That man, what distinguishes man from any other creation, even from animal, meiser ha'adam min ha'bahim, is the fact that he could talk. That the human being could talk. And that comes from, and that's the nefesh chaya, that Hashem imbued in the human being. This is what human being is so special. The additional fact the human being is inherently intellectual, one way or another. They have the ability to think, to strategize, to organize their mind in ways that brings them to success or chas v'shalom in other areas. They are able to even the chachma. They have chachma. They have wisdom, which is of course the gift the human being has, which any other creation does not. We're talking true chachma, true intellect. It could be used the other way around. The pasuk says chamim hem lahara also, which is a lot of chachma, the conspiring and so on. This is the gift of human being, the human being, which he has chachma. But together with the chachma, he has the ability to formulate words, communicate with others, with his tongue, his lashon, his tongue, his language. And of course, there's many languages, how people communicate, but the whole idea of speech is something which is phenomenal, stupendous idea, the fact that a human being could formulate words and sentences and convey and interact with others. We don't sometimes pay attention, we take it for granted, but this is something very special. That's why Adam is Adam el Elyon, he carries the superior qualities of his creator. That's why Adam is called, one of the reasons Adam is called Adam, because Adam el Elyon, he's similar to the Elyon, the primordial Adam, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Dimyon, it's Adam, but nonetheless, he's gifted the inner workings of Hashem. And Hashem, of course, there's a Sarma Moris Niverayim, of course, it's a different type of talking. Hashem's talking, now we're talking, but Hashem gave us that gift of speech. So the healthy human being has the healthy chokhmah that we explained the last few weeks. We'll explain why is it attributed to chokhmah. It's to the core of the nefesh. A healthy nefesh is able to talk. If it's not a healthy nefesh, Achman on someone's mute, there's a compromise, of course. In his soul, there's a compromise. In his inner workings, that's where there's a compromise, and therefore the person, unfortunately, is mute. He can't talk, despite he or she has all the instruments, which usually establish the actual words and sentences. So where does the actual words and sentences come from? Is it the instruments or the nefesh? Well, understandably, it's the nefesh which gives the ability to the person to express himself in speech, to talk, to be able to talk, to convey via speech, via words. However, when he actually or she has to execute those words, of course, then you need the instruments, and the instruments are extremely crucial in order to formulate a sentence, in order to be able to one express himself. As we mentioned the other day in last class, someone's got a bruise on his tongue. You could hear it in their speech. And if it's a dry lip or a cough or cold, it's not only their coughing, but simply the words. You hear that particular instrument, call it the instrument, it's the hey meitzei sapeh. There's a fragmentation, it's compromised, and then understandably that is reflected in the words the person it talks. It's immediately reflective, particularly the letters which are associated directly with that instrument. If the lamed of chas v'shalom, someone hurt their tongue, you hear it in their lamed as an example, or any other letter which comes and directly is associated with tongue. And so when it comes to lips and throat and gums and teeth and so on. So when you talk about ruach malula, the nefesh chay ruach malula, understandably that's the real area where their speech comes from. The idea that it has to formulate itself with these five instruments, as crucial as they are, and if chas v'shalom anyone is compromised, again, it compromises the actual ability to express oneself, but that's not where speech is attributed to. As we mentioned, the mute has all the instruments, all the mitzvah in perfect condition, but they can't talk. And sometimes they make an effort too. You see, their starting point is the five instruments, and that's why it's difficult for them to express a word, because their starting point is not where speech begins, not where speech commences. Speech is associated with the most sensitive areas of the nefesh, the deepest, the chokhmah of the nefesh. So Rebbe explains that all the elements which were created, again, malchus chamalchus kalamim, not to go into it now, the hey of malchus, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, malchus peh, that's where all the energy comes from. But where does it attribute? And all the elements are created, and all the malachim, all the angels, and the worlds, and the angels, and the chambers, whatever. Again, we learned this in detail in the previous class, a click away. But of course, they come from the speech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kaviyachol, we'd of course add, which is malchus chamalchus koli lamim. All the elements come from the energy of malchus, the hey of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the hey, just like by a human being in the mouth, is just the external dimension of the words and the phrases and the sentences. It comes from the most inner part of the nefesh, and not only the level higher than the malchus, which is the midas, and not even higher than the midas, the bina, but stafka the chokhmah, the deepest strands of the nefesh associated with chokhmah, again, as we explained, which is really the core of the nefesh. That's where the energy ultimately comes from. However, there's certain levels within elements which are, you see the direct link of the inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Chokhmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore you find so much attachment of all those elements with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The world of Malachim, they're constantly serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They sense the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They demonstrate their fear, their awe, their submission so passionately because they sense that, yes, they are, of course, the byproduct of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Malchus. But they sense where the speech comes from, the source of the speech, which is Hashem's Chochmah. And therefore they're so connected, they're so overtly connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with much involvement and passion and so on, and clarity for that matter. As much as a created being could be clear with their creator. But nonetheless, there's understanding, there's appreciation, there's perception, and as such, there's passion in their service. It's love and fear, for that matter, we say it every single day. In davening, in the Birchas Kriya Shema, the experience of the Malachim. We say we don't know exactly what it is, but we could one way or another appreciate that they're so involved. This world, however, also, of course, my Maimonides says, including this world. But what is emphasized in this world, what is underscored in this world, or what do you feel, what do you sense more in this world, is not where the speech comes from. The Abba, which is Yasad Barata, as Al-Tareb was Lashon earlier. The Chochmah, which ultimately manifests in Malchus. But what we feel, what this world senses, is more the externality of speech. The way the speech is attributed to the 5 instruments, the Peh itself, the Malchus itself, not what is behind the scene. And that's the reason why this world, by default, does not demonstrate that oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no comparison to the way this world, by default, is in constant reaction to the energy which it constantly receives from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not just like once, it's thousands of years ago HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. It's every moment Hashem is creating the world. And even then, the world should have sensed its creator, demonstrated its creator, identified with its creator, demonstrated pride of its creator. And anything like that does not exist by default in this world, as we don't have to explain it. This is so obvious, but it's beyond that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is constantly creating this world. As Al-Teb writes in Shayich and Mamunah, Hashem would pull back the energy for one moment. Not that part of the world would break apart, decay, or anything. It would just simply disappear. Because every moment it's receiving its energy from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. And if that's the case, why shouldn't the world, you're receiving all your energy every moment, every second, every millisecond, and beyond that from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Your whole existence comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shouldn't you demonstrate, yes, Hashem Echad U'Shmei Echad? By default? I mean, the case is it's so not so. It's the toil of the Yid to introduce the Emes Hashem La'olam, one Yid, another Yid, thousands and tens of thousands, and millions and tens of millions of Yidden throughout all generations and beyond, which through their living the life of Torah mitzvahs, which Torah is the inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah is the Anechi Hashem Elokecha. It says in a number of places the difference of Asar Ma'amaros and Asaras Adibres. That is the pnimis, that is associated with the Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mitzvahs is pnimis and it's Tzeinei of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they toil for so long. What they're doing actually is they're introducing the Emes Hashem, like it says in the Pasuk, Emes Hashem Le'olam. The result, of course, will be B'hai Hashem L'melech HaKol Ha'aretz, B'aimahu Yi Hashem Echad U'Shmei Echad. For that matter, I think we once mentioned, beautiful Pirush of the Al-Tareb, I believe it's in the end of Chaisar, it says Yi. Usually it's Yud Kei Vav Kei, which eventually, as it comes down, the Shem Havaya, the energy comes as Shem Havaya, especially when it identifies with the Hey of Shem Havaya. That's where you have the Bria, the creation of this very world. As the Malchus is much more underscored in Olam Hasi, in this very, very physical world. So therefore, there is this eclipse of the Emes, the opacity which comes as a result of that camouflage, of that eclipse over the Emes. When Mashiach will come, everything will be taken away, because we toil, Am Yisrael toil, like Al-Tareb writes. Mashiach and Gula is not like something just comes out of nowhere. It's an accumulative process that Am Yisrael, Ma'aseinu V'Avodas Seinu, our work and our service for millennia, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, millennia after millennia, that one every mitzvah uncovers the emes, which is be'etzem, in essence, the speech in the end of the day does come from the pnimis hanefesh of the one who's talking. How much more so when we're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though this world more underscores the externality of Hashem's speech. The instruments, the Heimetzes Hapeh, as such, there's no chayas, there's no vitality, there's no godly vitality, which is demonstrated in Elam Hazeh, the Yiddish, the toil, and introduced by Emes Hashem Le'olam, and it should always be recognized that no, it's Hashem, it's God, the godly energy, and it should be overtly recognized and demonstrable that this is in the end of the day Hashem. And that's what Mashiach is all about. Vayemahu yiyeh. So the Alter Rebbe has the word. There won't be the vavke. It'll be yiyeh, yudke. It would be so evident that it's coming from the yud, the chachma shem havaya, expanded through the hey. The, so to say, issues which come through chas v'shalom. Of course, it's the Shem Hashem, the holy name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's the last hey which ultimately can cover up over the emes of Hashem Himself. So the Eilam Yisrael Yayinim, it doesn't. And therefore everything is so the ambiance and the expression, if it's angels and Neshamas, Malachim, Ganei Natach, Ganei Elyon, which is mentioned so many times, Ganei Natach, Ganei El Mayitzira, Ganei Elyon, El Mabriya, it is so, everything is about, you don't have to look, and Neshama doesn't have to seek godliness. It's Neni Miziv Ashchina, that becomes the norm. Because of course, how can it be different? It's coming directly, Hashpah comes directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it comes through Malchus also. Because without Malchus, nothing is created. Everything, Basar Mamaris, everything is created. Malchus Chol Malchus Kol Ilam, not only this world, but nonetheless, there it sends the source of speech, which is the Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. While Elam Hazeh, and as such, everything is completely, the environment is 100% godly, of course, on different levels. In every level of Gan Eden, it's so many levels of Gan Eden based on what it says. Moshe Rabbeinu is for 3,000 years higher and yet higher in his state of Gan Eden, which no one could really imagine what a Gan Eden like Moshe Rabbeinu is all about. But it's even Moshe Rabbeinu says there's Ein Sof levels on high. There's infinite levels on high. But the common denominator of all these levels that they're created from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What else is there? While this very physical world, which comes also from Malchus, what is underscored is that Malchus is the Hey Meitzis Apel, like in the example, the externality of speech. The formulation of speech, of course, comes from the Hey Meitzis Apel, but that's not where speech comes from. When it's underscored, it's like the mute trying to pronounce a few words. You see that it's not, you don't see the humanness. You don't see the gift of the human being in Rahman al-Islam. Yes, it is compromised. We say again, Rahman al-Islam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should forsake and should just give health to every single human being. And the health should be uncompromised, and the health should be to the fullest extreme, and people should be able to talk and express themselves. And generally, there should be only gesund. But when you see the mute trying to say a few words, Rahman al-Islam, you see that there's something wrong. There's nothing. You don't see the reichkeit, the richness of the human being being expressed. You just see something which totally is just about the letters which are trying to push their way through. And so too, that even by the healthy human being, of course they need the instruments, but the instruments is just the passage. The instruments are just the externality of speech. So of course they need to go through the Heimetz Zapeh. And if there's something compromised, the instruments, these 5 instruments, as we mentioned before, you could hear it. But nonetheless, you sense this is the human being talking. And the formulation of the words is just the externality of speech. So this physical world only has the externality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's speech, which is the Malchus. And therefore, in a world which is constantly being created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, unfortunately does not sense, and does not only sense, it doesn't identify it. To the contrary, it fights against it by default. Alter Rebbe has in Perek Lamed Zayin, L'Kuti Amorim, a click away, towards the beginning of the 37th chapter, Lamed Zayin. that speaks about the purpose of creation, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a dwelling place for himself in this very physical world, a world which not only does not identify with its own energy, but it says, Ani v'afsiyot, it's about me and here I am, don't talk to me about anything higher. With chutzpah, it wasn't used there, the lashon chutzpah. It's taking the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or its whole existence of the energy is the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and fighting against God, godliness, and so on. You have to have the Yid, which would come, introduce it, live his life. Of Torah mitzvahs, introducing the Emes Hashem La'elam. But on its own, it doesn't, because what is underscored in Elam Hazeh is the Hey of Shem Havaya, the Malchus itself, the Meitzis Hapeh, the instruments, which is again the total, by far, by extreme comparison to the Chochmah of the Nefesh, where the speech comes from, extremely external, and therefore it doesn't demonstrate by default the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's all it says. This lowly world with the energy which is in it is too small from handling, comprehending, tolerating, be better, the light and energy from the formation of the letters and the inner workings of the letters, to shine and to extend itself in without a covering, without a garment, without a concealment. The way this air shines and extends itself to the souls, the neshamas of Yisrael, and to Malachim. And Al Rebbe adds over here that even the container of Elam Hazeh cannot contain the energy, and for that matter, the idea of Hakbala, the idea of the finitude, energy, the finite energy, finiteness, finitude, is so much part and parcel of creation of Elam Hazeh. Zman and Mokim. As Dr. Rebbe explains, when you want to encapsulate the idea of the Olam, it's Zman and Mokim, time, past, present, future, space. This table has a certain measurement. Everything is measured. Even the greatest, the most grand part of creation is also measured. The sun, for example, is 167 times, says the Rambam, greater, greater than the, in size, that is, than Elam Hazeh, this physical world, which means 167 times the parameters of Elam Hazeh. So it's 167, not 168, as an example. Everything is limited in Elam Hazeh. Elam Hazeh is the icon of limitation. Does it mean higher than Elam Hazeh, the worlds above? Everything is infinite, where there's different expressions of infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This idea, this stark expression of finiteness does not exist on high. There is Zman and Mokim, but it's a different idea of Zman, a different idea of Mokim. And of course, the more you go higher and higher, until you come to Elam Atzilus as an example. It's a world that houses the Ein Sof, everything is Belikvul in Atzilus, and how much more so higher than Atzilus. Of course, there's the Ein Sof, the true infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is completely, fully manifest. But real Hagbal of finiteness is in this world, and therefore the Alter Rebbe says not only because of the Eir. It's the world itself cannot contain, cannot tolerate this unique Eir, this huge energy, or the intense energy of the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where the speech would come from, like it is on high. It's just ha'ora b'ashpa, ba v'nishba, le'elam hazeh. The Rebbe says on high, which means the way it's in the world's on high. And the neshamas benefit, and malachim stand and experience that area of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because in the onset, the world is not a limited world, and therefore it's able to contain so much more. It really goes back and forth also, if you think about it. This world was created in a unique way. The Hagbala was also created because, again, additional Hel and Vehester, cover-ups of the energy of HaKadosh, which creates the finiteness within Elam Hazeh, and together with that, simultaneous to that, or as a result of that, because it's finite, it cannot contain the inner workings of the Eir of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the Ashpa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the extension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's only Ha'ara b'Ashpa, Ba v'Nishba Elam Hazeh, just a Ha'ara, and Ashpa, just a bit, a trickle of light, an energy, comes into Olam Haza, and that is the externality of speech, the externality of Malchus. Similar to the Meitzes HaPeh, the instruments of the mouth, which is the Chemer V'Kufaisius, the material, if you will, and the body of the letters, V'Chitzeniusam, and their externality, which is the breath, which is divided to the 7 Havolim of Kehelis, Shalema Elamim, to which the world stands, the famous expression of Shlema Melchin Kehelis, Hevel Avolim Amar Shlema. So there is idea, of course, there's different expression meanings to it. One of the simple meanings out there, Shlema says, in the end of the day, it's all vanity. And of course it's vanity without any purpose, and without seeing the pnimius. There's nothing there. And as he concludes the Kehelis, in the end of the day, it's about fearing God and doing His mitzvahs. What he was saying, that this is real, this is authentic, this is genuine. This is the core energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we are meant to introduce into Olam. It says Asara Kaf B'Shekel HaKadosh. We spoke about this quite a few times. The fusion of the inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this very physical world, and finite world. Because one can argue, okay, so just what do we need this part over here? Let's just appreciate and identify with this which is on high. There are Olamis, and the Olam is constantly recognized in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is manifest in those Olamis. Why this extra layer, which is just causing so much confusion? And it does cause a lot of confusion. And the answer, of course, again, Lamed Zayin, Lamed Vav, that is, I think I said Lamed Zayin before. And Lamed Vav in Tanya, the Rebbe continues in Lamed Zayin, this thought, but the Alter Rebbe established that that's where the Eibishter wants a Dira B'Tachtein, a dwelling place, an abode down here in this physical world. This is where the whole purpose is. On its own, of course, it's confusing. But in this confusing world, that's where Hashem wants his dwelling place, and that's why he created everything. But this is where the tachlis, this is where the ultimate objective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. But on its own, Hevel Avolim Amar Shleima. Rebbe teaches over here, Hevel is, in this context, he teaches Hevel is referring to that breath, which ultimately formulates the letters. There has to be a breath coming in and banging, so to say, and connecting with these 5 instruments to which the letters are ultimately constructed, put together, sentences, and eventually the ability to convey them. Or the actual letters, with the ability to convey is more associated with the nefesh, the organization in speech, and so on and so forth. So this is the havolim which Shlomo Melech was alluding to, that in the end of the day, this world is only about the externality of speech, which is again the breath and the Heimetzis Hapeh. This is the energy which comes from Hashem's mouth, but it's the external of Hashem's mouth, which invests in this physical world, and all its army, literally, which means the entire Olam Haza, it's army, which means the established dynamics exist in Olam Haza. It's the sun of the moon, and everything, the stars, and even within down here on this plane, everything, the establishment of Olam Haza would be the army of Olam Haza. To give them life. Of course, in these letters, they're behind those letters, understandably. Make no mistake. Of course, we're talking about Kodesh Baruch Hu, which he doesn't have that problem we spoke about, that it should be solely the instruments which formulate the words. Innerly, of course, there's the tzura of the Asius, the image, the inner energy, machshava, the thought, from the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but yet, of course, higher and higher, to the chokhmah, to the core nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem's rotz and Hashem's chokhmah, which is miyuchedes bein sab baruch hu betachas, which is one with the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the ultimate unity. Of course, behind the scene there is. And that's the only way we, through our Torah and our mitzvahs, could unravel the energy which exists inherently in these Asias and introduce the inner workings, the inner chayes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. like we said, to fuse the two, and eventually the world should demonstrate the Einid Milvadein, nothing else existing other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming through the Elam Haza itself. And that's why Mashiach will come, Hashem, the whole world, the world which we know it, as we know it, will be full, the entire world. Yeshai was very careful and precise with the words. Not only there will be bits and bits and pieces, this yeshiva, this koil, even in the koil you have the of course you have limud Torah, but the idea nolakus is also vital. Even someone learns Torah, that Rambam himself says clearly, Allah and Rambam, that a person has to do whatever he can. He should have the idea, the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says when Mashiach will come, it says the whole world will know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Importantly to note, knowing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yeah, understandably, it's a halach in Chesed Mishpat, halach in Erachayim, because that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But there's additional to that, and the Rambam means no, you deal in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not the halach. It is. Take it out of context. The halacha is the etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Aneichi Hashem Lekecha. But on top of that, there's the idea, knowledge in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which of course comes through learning Chassidus, as I mentioned many times. The way it truly is, it comes through learning Chassidus Chabad. And there's a lack of Yediyah and Elokus. We cannot make up our own trajectories. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells every Yid, Adaita Hayim, Vashaveisel Vavecha. You have to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the only way you could have somewhat shleimus in the attention of your heart and that recognition, Hashem Hu Elikim, that everything is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you don't have that Yediyah, you're lacking. You could talk about it and say speeches about it, but you are lacking as a human being in your Yediyah and Elokus. And Hashem says, V'yadaita, it's your mandate to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu today comes Yediyah, like the Rambam himself says, Lashon, in Chochmah, and Bina, and Das. You see that Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, I believe it's Perik Tes or Yud, and the idea, the essentiality of every single Yid learning Chassidus, and with Chassidus itself, Chassidus Chabad, which gives the ability of the Yid to have clarity one way or another, the way the Torah mandates to be a daita hayem mashavayisel babecha. And that's why it says Mola ha'oretz. It doesn't say Mola ha'oretz halacha es Hashem. Of course, halacha is the etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it says Deus Hashem. If you look in the end of the halacha in Rambam, look at the last few halachas in Rambam, Kol Kolim Kulim Ladas is Hashem. Kifikecha Adam Ladas is about Yediyah, knowledge, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what the pasuk means. Umola ha'oretz Deus Hashem. So, first of all, it's Mola ha'oretz. Not only the yeshivas and the kolim were there, also there has to be, of course, every single year has to have the Yediyah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And one tries to relegate something, in the end of the day, what do they used to say? That sometimes a certain Yidin, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu themselves would tell them, yeah, you're lacking in Avodas Hashem. They would turn to Hashem and say, Hashem, what do you know about Avodas Hashem? It's almost if it wouldn't be so true, it'd be, of course, it's humorous, but it's far from it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants that Yadaita Hayim, it's a mandate in Torah. So there has to be the Yediyah of Hashem, additional, of course, to Hashem's Torah. But besides that, it doesn't only say in this yeshiva or this koil and so on. It says V'yadaita Mola ha'oretz Deus Hashem, and it doesn't say there will be Deus Hashem in the oretz. It will say Mola ha'oretz. It says the world will be full. Full means to say a cup is full. It's full. You can't put anything else in there. That's the simple meaning of full. The entire world will be full of knowledge of Hashem. And we say, Hashem HaMelech al kol ha'oretz, means the entire kol ha'oretz will sense the reign of Hashem, the Malchus Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As long as we didn't get there yet, we can't tap ourselves on the back, because it's a matter of the entire world being, this metamorphosis of the entire world, and sensing the inner workings in this context of Hashem's speech, which is the tzura, ultimately the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, because in the end of the day, Hashem's speech is always a healthy speech. What is underscored in this world by default is the externality of Hashem's speech, but in behind the scene, of course, there's the tzura says, you said, the and machshava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's the midas, and then there's tzayne and chochmasei, and it's all one with the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So behind the scene, every part of Elam Hazard is part of the expression of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and one should be enabled to sense that infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, it's not, there's a certain blockage. It's about Aved, that's where the Eibush established. It's Aved of the Yid to the Megala, to reveal the Emes Hashem, the Emes Hashem, the innate inherent Emes Hashem le'olam, to connect it with Olam. And the Koach we have with the Koach an ability to do so is because Be'etzim the Tzuris is right behind the scene. You have the Tzura, the inner workings of Hashem's speech, associated with Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is miyuchud with the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The problem is, on its own, what is underscored is the externality of Hashem's speech. But that makes it clear, of course, behind it you have all that. Tzura, not only the chaymer, but the tzura says, and the machshava, from the holy midas, and etc., which is the bina of HaKadosh Baruch, which all is one with the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch. But in this world, Hashem said, it's your mandate. You're going to have to uncover that. You're going to have to megala, reveal Hashem La'ilam, through learning Torah and doing Hashem's mitzvahs, and so on. In the brackets which we're learning, that Izal writes that the externality of the kelim of Malchus Atzilus, which are hinted in the Shehed B'Shem Havai Baruch Hu, Hein Yord V'Nasim Neshama Le'Masi, they descended, they became the neshama, which is the energy, like a neshama to a guf. It's the function, it's the energy to the body. So they became the neshama to Masiyah, to this physical world. So which again, this is the externality of the kelim and machna, because of the pnimis of the kelim extends itself or expresses. This is what is the pnimis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is again by default the reality which exists in the worlds higher than Elam Asiyah. And if you have to say higher, of course you say higher, there's different levels. There's Elam Asiyah Ruchnis, it says, spiritual dimension of Elam Asiyah. Then there's the Elam Asiyah, Elam Yitzira, and Elam Abriya, and higher than Elam Atzilus. And it says a number of places there is infinite amount of Elamas, even though it's brought to so many places, even pre-Chassidus, of course, the four worlds. And each level has another expression of a deeper inner working of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which demonstrates more and more of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Can't compare Yitzira to Bria, like it can't, which even in the context of Gan Eden, it says Gan Eden Atachton is Neil Yitzira, Gan Eden Ha'el is Neil Bria. There's no comparison between the two. So the neshama has to go through Nahar Dinor in order to have an aliyah from one level, namely from Gan Eden Atachton, Gan Eden Ha'el, and in Bechlal from one level to a higher level. Because you can't. There's no comparison, but there's the common denominator. There's so tumult zechalakus. It's all about the tumultuous. There's a tumultuous spirit of the reality of godliness because it just feels its creator. There's no other energy. But inherently, it's so in this physical world. The only thing is, in this physical world, Hashem, what is demonstrative is the chitzonius, the externality of the Kelim of Malchus Atzilus, which is hinted in the shame, hey. In other words, precisely the hay, so to say, without the natural sensation of what goes on higher, similar to the speech, which comes from the inner workings, the most inner nuanced workings of the nefesh. But you say a disconnect, the idea is that's the way Hashem established that the hay would be manifest in Elam Asiyah and become the neshama, which is the energy to Elam Asiyah. So says Tikunim, which is a part of Zer. The Yud is Batzilus. You wonder, we speak about Atzilus. Like it says the Alter Rebbe, he couldn't many times finish even the word Atzilus, because he said Atzilus. He was there, we could easily finish the word, because, of course, for obvious reasons. Alter Rebbe understood and appreciated Atzilus. Atzilus is a world who houses the Ein Sof, the true infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This parenthetically, the famous Alter Rebbe, he said Atzilus. He couldn't finish the word because he right away sensed the energy of Atzilus. And Atzilus, it says, just like there's the four worlds, there's the four letters of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's holy name. So it says the hey, the final, similar to the expression the hey maitzis apeh, which for that matter you also have the Hey, as the Alter Rebbe says in the previous, earlier he says, which is based on Yishayich Lemona, that every letter has the Hey, which is the extension of breath, which eventually would strike up with the five instruments, would connect with the five instruments, the formula letter. But the Hey is the breath, would eventually connects and is the backbone of every single letter, if you think about it. It's the breath, it's also the Hey, referring to the Hey Meitzis Apeh. Hey is the numerical value of Hey, is the five, which these are five instruments. So all the emphasis is on the instruments, the externality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Dibur. That's what's manifest in Elam Hazeh. The Yud, so you have the Vav in Elam HaYitzira, the higher Hey in Elam HaBriya, expansion of Elokus, Bina, we spoke about this as well in the past, but the Yud, which is the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is in Atzilus. That's why Atzilus is a world which houses, and everything about Atzilus, Lo Yigur Chora, it's all about Elokus, and the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is even manifest in Atzilus. You can't compare to higher than Atzilus. It's still an Eilam, but there's no comparison. That's why it says in a number of places, it's not Atzilus, it's always compartmentalized with the Atzilus and Bia, which is B'ri Yitzir, because Atzilus is the whole world, and it's a different type of phenomenon. Atzilus, you have the full manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why it says Yud is in Atzilus, right? Yud Kei Vav Kei. You have Asiyah, Yitzira, and Bria, and then Yud, and it's in Atzilus. That's why Atzilus is all about Elokus, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yud is Mekarin, like it says, Nes rests in Atzilus. And Hey Tata, the lower Hey, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name has two Heys. The lower Hey is in Asiyah. It's demanded from the Yid to introduce the inner working, the tzura of the Asius, to higher and yet higher and yet higher, which is Miyuchad and Ein Sof Baruch Hu, to be Megala in Eilam. That it should be manifest in a way that it should be obvious. Malach ha'aretz de'as Hashem. B'hay Hashem l'melech ha'kol ha'aretz. B'yimu yiyeh. Again, the Yudke will be default. May it be b'mheir